3-1 the final score at the Emirates, but I've written down, if I was doing a one-word review, Glenn, I've written better. I mean, 2 away defeats this week, but 2 very different performances.
Yeah, it was definitely a better performance. It's not hard to be better than the Bournemouth performance, let's be honest. And there was basically restored a bit of pride in the team. I mean, I was ready to put my foot through something last week, but this week you came away at the end of the game thinking, yeah, we actually did okay there. It was a little bit too much to ask to get points out of the game, but I think overall we put in a decent performance, and it just restored a bit of faith in the players and the manager a little bit. But I mean, the bottom line is we lost again, but yeah, it was a step in the right direction. But we've had these before, and whilst that old thing about defeats away at Arsenal, bearing in mind we always lose there, they don't define your season. It's a kind of an honourable defeat this time, but we're going to get onto the Leicester game. We now get into the stage where that has to be a result. We can't have another. Oh yeah, we've made a little step in the right direction, but we've lost again. We really do need to get some points on the board, and quickly. But overall, I came away from the game thinking, we did okay there, and when you play at Arsenal, you need to get a result, you need everything to go your way. It didn't quite, and I'm not blaming the referee, but he didn't help. I didn't think he was very even-handed with the way he refereed, especially in the first half. It's interesting that we're playing Leicester next, because when they were playing Bournemouth the weekend and they had a goal disallowed, Bournemouth did, where a cross came into the box, someone who was offside went for it, didn't get a touch, and it bounced into the net, and that got disallowed. And it's kind of similar to the second goal we let in. We needed that to go in our favour, and it didn't. And at 2-1 down, we hit the post, we hit the bar. So overall, it was not too bad. The third goal, yeah, it's unfortunate, and it's but that's we're pushing up at that stage, and that can happen against a team as good as Arsenal are. But overall, I was I actually quite enjoyed watching it, unlike the Bournemouth game, which was awful. I mean, we still made mistakes. There was a little bit too much suicide ball out from the back. It could have been horrible. The first 20 minutes, we gave the ball away kind of 5 times running without getting out of our own half, trying to play out. So it could have gone a bit wrong. But once we got past the first 20 minutes, stuck in the game and got to half-time relatively comfortably. There was a couple of shots at the end of the first half, and that was it. So defensively, it was a massive step up from what we had against Bournemouth. Particularly impressed with Jan Bednarek yesterday, because he kind of went missing against Bournemouth, but yesterday he was front and centre of everything. So I think the partnership with him and Harwood-Bellis was decent. But Mr. Sugawara is some of his defending leaves a little bit to be desired. But they're fine points that need to be sorted out before we play the Leicester game, the Wolves game, and whatever other sort of 6-pointers we've got coming up. But
there's a few.
Overall, I came away reasonably happy with the performance.
The one that nobody saw coming, Alfie, was Ryan Manning back into the starting lineup. Just talk us through that back 4, back 5, and the decision around that.
Yeah, well, I don't think Russell Martin saw Ryan Manning coming back into the starting 11 until Saturday morning either, because it was actually Ryan Fraser who was set to start the game in a role similar to what I suppose he did at the playoff final, and did very well. Obviously, he had a disaster at Vitality, but who didn't? So it was going to be a case of, the two of them would double up on Bukayo Saka, who's obviously Arsenal's biggest threat. It doesn't take a genius to work that out. When he was struck down villainous, Ryan Manning was the next best option, and I thought he did the job pretty well. He was more advanced than Carl Walker-Peters. I'd probably had them the other way around. There was times where Ryan Manning was up on the halfway line, looking to get forward as well. But they did a good job. I think, although he ended up getting obviously 2 assists and the goal, and he's the key man, and the fantasy points and all that, he actually was limited to fairly little in the first half. And I mean, that first half is one of the most one-sided sort of games I've ever seen. But it didn't feel like that meant Arsenal should have been winning. Do you know what I mean? Like they didn't have too much. I think we dealt with the set piece as well. They were, they were slightly more pragmatic. Southampton. They did a really good job, kept it to 0-0 at halftime. So yeah, it was a surprise to see Ryan Manning come back in. I don't think it necessarily means he then starts the game against Leicester. I think it was just a specific sort of tactical change by design for the opposition. And, Russell Martin made some changes for the opposition on Monday at Bournemouth, and they went horribly, horribly wrong. And I was the first person to criticise them, and not the only person. Everybody I've spoken to felt the same way about that system. So you have to give him credit for when something does go slightly better, and it did. I think the changes he made were good. I would like to see us go back to that 4-2-3-1, that slightly more attacking variant for the key games that Glen mentioned. But they did well. They came up with solutions to a system, and they could well have got some in. I think Cameron Archer will be really pleased to get a first goal. Good finish. When he joined, I think we felt that he could sort of dovetail on the left with Ben Brereton Diaz come inside and Cameron going out to the left. Obviously, he's decided that Ben Brereton Diaz isn't allowed to leave the touchline, so it won't be him at this point. But if it's someone like Tall Paul, who I'll leave for Steve to talk about, I imagine, it could be Cameron Archer goes out on the left and makes way for someone like that. So, yeah, I think we saw things that I liked about Saturday. I left that, I felt Saints were disappointed, but they didn't disappoint.
It was a more defensive mindset than we've seen before, Steve, wasn't it? And obviously, as Glenn said, we managed to hold out until half time. We had to deal with not having a lot of the ball, which was different for us.
Yeah, although we were still trying to play the same way, sort of out from the back. And the thing that I found a little bit frustrating in that first half was how quickly we were trying to play the game. So when on the rare occasion we actually got the ball, or the ball went out of play and we had a goal kick or whatever, we were desperate to get the ball back in play really, really quickly, which you kind of think in a game like this, that's exactly what Arsenal want.
I think you said last week that you were predicting a lot of time wasting, weren't you? And a lot of dark arts,
it's fascinating that that's not what we were doing. I was just thinking, I mean, surely every goal kick has got to take like 40, 50 seconds to be released. I think there was only one just before half time where Ramsdale went long, and we probably took 30 to 40 seconds to get that one back in play. But all the others were done pretty quickly, but we were happy to do so. And like free kicks, we were winning. I mean, on the rare occasion that Tony Harrington deemed to give us something our way, presumably someone had just been decapitated at the point he finally gave us a foul. We were like, we pick the ball up, put it down, and play the short pass quickly. It's like, come on, lads, give yourself a chance in this game, because otherwise you're just going to run out of steam. You're going to be absolutely exhausted. But yeah, I mean, defensively, I think realistically, when you go, especially when you go away to these sides, at home it's a little bit different. You can possibly set yourself up to have a go a little bit more, but away from home against the big boys, and we'll find that out in a few weeks' time at City as well. I think you've got to be a bit more pragmatic. And I mean, Russell Martin has never kind of shied away from doing that when he's needed to. It's not this sort of ridiculous dogma that people suggest with him, where he's absolutely wedded to one formation, one lineup of 11 players, one way of playing. I mean, I think the sort of way of playing is probably the more fixed of the three, but even then there are variations on that, as we have seen. Like even just this season, we've played at least 3 different formations already this season to start games, and yeah, so you've got to have a little bit of flexibility. And I think everybody would fully accept that you go into this sort of game, you've got to set yourself up to be solid. And I mean, the fact that Aaron Ramsdale didn't have a shot to save until the 44th minute shows we kind of got that right. I think. I mean, few little ricochets went our way, but when you got that many bodies back in the penalty area, that tends to happen, I think. So yeah, first half absolutely fine. Would have liked to have. It was interesting the substitution he made when Stewart got injured, because given Onwuachu was on the bench, I did kind of wonder whether he might have been the more suitable replacement, sort of immediately. I mean, maybe the question is whether he's got an hour in him at the moment, which, I mean, maybe he hasn't. But certainly where we were looking to fire the ball either into Stewart's chest or into his feet, where he was dropping short for it and trying to hold it up and then relieve a little bit of the pressure. Cameron Archer coming on is obviously a very different centre forward. He wants to play on the shoulder and he wants balls into the channel. So that was why basically the last 15 minutes of that first half, we ended up being another 10 yards deeper because there just wasn't an outball for us to even have a chance of getting up to halfway, let alone into Arsenal's half. But second half, we seemed to feel our way into it and found a way of kind of opening up space a little bit. I think Arsenal tried to kind of stretch the game a little bit more, which kind of helped us in terms of counter-attacking because it left more space for us to get into. And I mean, Raheem Sterling finding himself in a sort of defensive midfield position meant that we could get a little bit of strength on him, win the ball back, and suddenly we were turning the other way, and that's where the goal came from. The only big disappointment really is that we held the lead for barely 2 minutes. And I mean, one thing that's quietly gone under the radar, I think, this season, sort of with the step up, is that, I mean, we noticed it 1 or 2 times, I think, last season, where teams that pressed us in a certain way, Flynn Downs really struggled to cope with the pace of it. And that's one thing I've kind of noticed in quite a few games. There's been a few where kind of games have almost passed him by and he's making sloppy mistakes that he wasn't making last season because, I mean, you basically get a fraction of a second less on the ball to make the decisions. And I mean, obvious thing that he had his best game against Ipswich because it's essentially another Championship team who were pressing at Championship pace. So he had enough time to make those decisions on when to play those little passes through the lines and things like that. Whereas obviously he gives the ball away for the equaliser. And if he had a fraction of a second more, he'd have probably actually retained the ball rather than trying to pass it left. Because there was a clear route for him just to dribble straight on up the pitch at that point. We'd worked ourselves out of a tight little hole, but then you give the ball away in that situation when you've only got literally your back 4 behind you, and there's 3 attackers running onto you. Yeah, you're banging trouble. And side like Arsenal were unlikely to pass up that opportunity, unfortunately.
We need to talk about the mistakes and we need to talk about the strikers, but Glenn, I just want to talk about the core, like Joe Aribo coming back in. It looked like, I know he started a few games at the start of the season, then he found himself out of the team. He was one of the few names that Russell Martin mentioned after that Bournemouth game. It looks like suddenly you've got Bednarek, Taylor Harwood-Bellis, you've got Joe Aribo sitting in front, you've got Aaron Ramsdale. There's that kind of like that core, and these should be the team that he sticks with going forward if they're all on top form.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I thought Joe Aribo against Bournemouth proved he was a better option than Leslie Oguchukwu at the moment to play next to Flynn Downs, basically. I mean, Aribo only really has had one bad game. It was a Brentford one. He wasn't great in that, but he was a little bit unfortunate, I thought, to get left out because he was left out for Oguchukwu, and we obviously hadn't seen much of him he's on loan from Chelsea, so I think that was made in a bit of blind faith. But Aribo's come back in, and I thought he was excellent the second half against Bournemouth, and he would be a very good candidate for man of the match from yesterday. I thought as well. I just thought he was good. He's just, we're going to talk about redemption of other players, but I mean, when you consider what Aribo was like 2 years ago, when he just looked slow, looked unfit, seemed to get knocked off the ball, didn't seem to make up his mind quickly enough what to do. It's just a massive, massive difference.
It was the Cup of Nations, wasn't it? He came back and he was just like a different player. Yeah,
I mean, he's obviously, like they all have, because he's got it in him to have a bad game, as all our players have. Otherwise, they wouldn't be playing for us. But I think as it stands at the moment, he brings you're looking for someone to partner Flynn Downs in the centre of midfield, basically, and he's probably the strongest option in terms of physicality. He also looks after the ball pretty well. So, and he certainly looks a lot quicker than he did a couple of years ago. So, I know, ultimately Will Smallbone will get himself fit and be an option there. You've got obviously Big Les as well, but to me, Aribo looks like the best option at the moment, and that was a very good game from him yesterday. I expect him to stay in the team now, to be honest.
The other name that got mentioned after the Bournemouth game, Alfie, was obviously Ross Stewart. We thought he might start. He did. Another injury, and it's just heartbreaking to see him subbed yesterday and another injury.
Yeah, I think the first thing to say about Ross Stewart is that I've seen a few sort of comments about it, and I think there is obviously frustration that you've spent £9 million on a striker who can't play for you. But there is obviously there's a human there who has spent the last 2 years on the sidelines. I don't know how much work they do to get back, but I know it's a lot. Having spent time with Nelson Semedo, they're in more than their teammates. They're in basically every day of the week, working hard to get back. It's obviously physically painful as well as it is mentally. And he's finally back. He's had a long journey playing in sort of lower leagues and in Scotland, and he's finally become a Premier League player. Got his first start at a club like Arsenal. And he only lasts 27 minutes. And I think Russell Martin said it's a muscle injury. It's a new muscle injury. And I think they sort of think it might be a bad one. So that's been scanned today. I don't know the results of that. I'm sure we'll find out in a couple of weeks before Leicester. But when you have injuries like that Achilles one, then the hamstring, you're compensating on different muscles, and it's a recipe for future injuries. So hopefully he's okay. I can't imagine what it felt like to go into that dressing room on his own and know that he's got another however long it is ahead of him. So Southampton have lost an option there, unfortunately. And I think they've taken as long as they could. They've been as careful as they could with his recovery. He played 2 games in November last year, played 2 games in May, and he's only now making his first start in October. I think in pre-season he didn't go to Spain. They took as long as they could with him. Really, it's just one of those things. So yeah, they've lost an option in Ross Stewart, but I'm glad to take the horns. They've gained one in Paul Onuachu, it looks like, who, as sort of mentioned, it did feel like the more natural fit coming on for the 27th minute, but there's still a pecking order there, right? And I don't think that Paul would have come on at all had Ross really sort of not gone off and sort of they lost that profile. So Cameron Archer for me is still the next guy in the order, but Paul comes on and his first touch not amazing, but after that he's doing step overs, stop and turns, he's beating William Saliba, and he looks like a different beast, and that's what Russell Martin called him. Russell Martin said that since the window has shut, he has been a different beast in training. Everybody knows what happened last year. They had to get rid of him on loan because of financial reasons for start, wages, and a small loan fee from Trabzonspor, which was a pain to actually get paid, but it did in the end, I'm pretty sure. And also he probably didn't want to play in the Championship. But he's now got a chance to play in the Premier League, and why not use him? However long it takes, whether he goes in January or the summer, he looks like an option, and he's something different. They tried to get one ball into the box. I think he didn't quite reach him, but the fact that he can play with his feet and can actually take players on and progress the ball, that's the bit where people sort of doubt him because he's 6'7" or whatever. But he can do it against Arsenal. He can do it against anyone. So yeah, I think it's really exciting for Southampton. Whether he goes and starts the next game or not, I don't know, but he's definitely an option.
It was a joy to watch, Steve, to be honest. I mean, this would be the biggest redemption arc ever, wouldn't it? And I mean, to be fair to him, he scored goals literally everywhere he's been, apart from here. So there is a great player in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would have discussed this 18 months or so ago when we were in the middle of that horrendous non-battle against relegation. But like the handful of top chances, I mean, how many actual crosses did we put into the box for him in that time? I think 3. One of which he hit the bar, and one of which he headed narrowly wide against Chelsea. So you put the ball in good areas for him, and there's always a chance. I mean, he's going to outjump pretty much anybody you would imagine. And yeah, it's all about giving him the right service. And yeah, people will say, well, the system that we play doesn't really call for a big lanky striker that you lump the ball up to. But we're not going to lump the ball up to him, obviously, because that's not what we do. But it just gives you an option. That if you're a goal down in the game, or if you're a goal up, I mean, goal down, you're obviously chasing the game. Your delivery into the area can be a lot more speculative. because you've got that kind of chaos factor, and he's occupying at least 2 defenders, you would imagine, more often than not. And if you're defending a lead, then last 20 minutes, who would you want? Like if the ball, if you're defending on the edge of your area, ball comes in, cross gets booted away by a centre back. Who would you want holding the ball up on the halfway line to relieve a bit of pressure and bring a potential counter attack into play? I mean, it's 6'7", 6'7" guy who's absolutely massive, who's just going to terrify defenders, you would think. And it now does give us that other option. I do certainly agree with Alfie that Archer is ahead of him in the pecking order. And I mean, excellent finish yesterday, and that's kind of the finish that we've kind of been hoping for in the previous games, and we kind of hoped that him getting off the mark in the Premier League for us is now kind of Shea Adams-esque.
The ketchup
even
bottle.
Even if it's short term, you get 2 months of goals out of him, and suddenly there's perhaps we're into double figures in points, and everything's actually looking quite promising. It's you never quite know how these things are going to go, but as I say, like we discussed it, didn't we, a couple of weeks ago, the Ipswich game. Archer impressed apart from his finishing, and yesterday he found the finishing touch.
Great goal
against the best, either the best or the second best team in the country. A defence that doesn't really concede goals, and he made them look fairly silly there, I thought. So fair play to him, and it's good that he didn't let the sort of misses in the previous games kind of affect his confidence, because I mean he's now been at 2 teams in red and white who have been anchored to the lower reach of the table for 18 months. So it must be kind of a little bit soul destroying for a centre forward to have relatively little service. But if we can keep giving him the service that we have got him, then I mean, if we're getting yesterday's finishing more often than not, then he'll score goals for us. I'm still certain of that.
Ultimately, Glenn, I know you mentioned it, we're still heading into the international break without a win, so all the noise is going to continue. I think the mistakes will be the thing that a lot of people are talking about, and it must be so frustrating for the coaches, because you can talk about lineups all day long, but when you've got what have been decent players making silly mistakes, still, it's just going to cost you.
Yeah, individual mistakes will always cost you. It doesn't matter how good you've been previously, or the strength of the opposition. I mean, the first goal was incredibly frustrating, as Steve has said. I would like to see us change the way we approach things once a goal has gone in. You remember last week we said, once we're behind, we've got to start playing forward quicker and put more pressure on the defence. It's like once we're ahead, we've just got almost spend 10 minutes making sure we're not giving anything away. So don't play a stupid sideways pass and you're on the edge of your own penalty area. It was just so needless to give away that goal, because even if he, I know he's not going to do this, but even if you boot it off for a goal kick or put it in the stand, just let everybody calm down and sense that there's danger around if you give the ball away in this particular area. I just like us to think a little bit more and play the match situation more. If it's 0-0, okay, that's the way you're told to play, so you play that way. But just read the situation a little bit more. And the second goal, already touched on it, that on another day that might be given offside because Marino goes for the ball. I mean, to me, the rule always used to be if you went for the ball, it would be given offside, but they've tried to obviously make it clearer now, and it's virtually, unless you touch the ball, we're not going to give it, but not always, obviously. So it's kind of got worse. But the thing I noticed about the second goal is Sugawara, who is the right back, just had, if you watch the replay, he didn't look round once at where Martinelli was, had no idea where he was, and it's, if you're the right back, the left winger is your man. And he just ball watching, basically. It's a really poor bit of defending. The third goal, I have a little bit more sympathy with Sugawara on, because obviously we're we're in crisis recovery mode, and everyone's just flying in trying to, we've been caught on the break sort of thing. But I mean, it was a good pass he played to Saka, and decent finish. But you could tell that he did not realise that Saka was there, because he didn't. There wasn't a moment where he thought, "Oh my God, I've got to dive in here and try and get in the way." And Saka just rolled it in, and so it was unfortunate. So I think in summary, the first goal is the one that annoys me most, because we should just be setting up to be solid at that point. Give it 5-10 minutes and not give anything away at all. Because it was obvious our goal was going to make them angry, but it was just so if they score a brilliant goal, then fair enough. But it's a great finish, to be fair. And that's the difference between Championship and the Premier League. Might have got away with it in the Championship, giving the ball away there, but it was a brilliant goal by Havertz. And but it was just so preventable. And that is always, we're talking about struggling at the top end of the pitch, and obviously that's if you're struggling at the other end as well, and you're giving away silly goals, then that's a recipe for disaster.
Doesn't look good. Before we do Player of the Week, anything else on Arsenal?
Well, I think it was positive that Tyler Diblin did well again. I mean, obviously we talk about it every week, don't need to go on about it, but just thought he did well, which is nice, because that's probably the biggest test he's had so far.
Do you want to put him down for your Player of the Week? There's a few, actually, isn't there? We've mentioned a few names already.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm nominating one, I'd nominate Jan Bednarek personally, because I think he was the best player this week.
Yeah.
I'm sure Glen was thinking that as well.
Let's ask him, Glenn.
Yes, I would agree. Jan Bednarek. I thought Joe Aribo was good. Matías Fernandes again. I just
for the goal, great as well.
Yeah, for the goal, but he shows what we don't do enough. He wins the ball. He wants to be positive. He shows intent. He passes the ball forward. Gave Archer, as Steve said earlier on, gave Archer exactly the sort of ball that he wants. And I got great faith in this kid already. He does read the game situation. Because I'm sure if it had been Paul on at that stage, he wouldn't have played that pass. He'd have probably fizzed it into his feet or his chest or whatever. The guy seems to have, just so much football intelligence, sees the pictures around him. And another thing Steve said a few weeks ago, people will be noticing him. They'll be noticing Tyler Diblin, but they'll be noticing him as well, even though he's probably not as spectacular, but just the way he plays football, the way he sees things. And I mean, I love the fact he gets stuck in as well. Said that before, for such a slight lad, he's going to be some player, and we've got to build a team around these guys to make sure that we get the best out of them. And we've got to get the best out of all our players. I mean, Paul, there's no point in playing him if we're not going to put crosses in. There's no point in putting balls for him to run onto. He's never going to get there. We've got to be a little bit more clever with what we're doing, and play the game situation and use all our players to the best of their ability.
I should also say on that goal, mine. I mean, I was directly opposite the away end from where I was positioned in the press box, and I know that Matty Fernandes and Cameron Archer, I mean, their celebrations were actually massive. They wheeled away. I think obviously Cameron Archer did his sort of thing, for the fans as well. It was unbelievable viewing. It was a real head loss moment. It's just a shame, like Glenn said, it only lasted for a few minutes.
It didn't count for anything. Steve, any other names for Player of the Week from you? I think we've pretty much covered all the standouts, haven't we?
Just in terms of sort of expectation, Ryan Manning, I thought did absolutely everything that you could have asked of him in that position. Him and Walker Peters doubled up on Saka brilliantly for the majority of that first half. I think he got the better of them once, maybe. One cross that was kind of fizzed over with his right foot fairly early on, but for the most part, they had him relatively quiet. So. I mean, it only kind of fell apart once he had to go off. I mean, it was fair enough that he had to go off around the 70-odd minute mark, because he's barely played any football this season. You can see him stretching out for a little bit before that. So no particular issues there. But I thought he was excellent for given the sort of short notice call up and probably the expectation level, I would imagine.